Alright, so this is going to be my part two on structural dissociation, the theory, and why I think that anybody with a significant trauma history should look into it and learn a little bit more about it, find out how it may or may not apply to you. Um, Bit of backstory. Uh, I have structural dissociation. I was diagnosed with a severe dissociative disorder earlier this year, um, after discovering the theory of structural dissociation through a specialized trauma treatment program that I was in. Um, and so today I wanted to talk about major like signs, significant indicators that professionals uh, look for in an individual that might signify some structural dissociation being at play. Um, I'll be referencing, research and professional sources, but also kind of my own experience because they're kind of intertwined in how I've come to understand this entire thing. I had been in a trauma treatment program, a partial hospitalization program, the end of 2022, about a year ago now, um, when I learned about identity confusion being a form of dissociation. Um, and I hadn't really heard that before. I'd heard the usual depersonalization, derealization, um, kind of encompassing what dissociation was. But the words identity confusion really stood out to me because I've never really been able to uh, view myself in a very cohesive way. Um, there's a lot of confusion, and there always has been, about who exactly I am at any given moment. And so I saw identity confusion and was like, that's something I'm confused about. Let me look into this. Um, and that's when I got Janina Fisher's book, Healing Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors, where she lists uh, several of these indicators that I'm about to mention. I checked off every box, searched for a specialist in dissociative disorders to get assessed, and the rest is history, I guess. So, some of the big ones are one, having a long, complex treatment history within the mental health context, um, that hasn't really resulted in much progress. A lot of different maybe models of therapy, psychotropic medications, different diagnoses later being switched out with other ones, yet the client is still kind of stuck where they were after all of this. For me, it had been about a decade of that before I got this diagnosis, which has actually led to me making some progress for the first time in my life. But I was in and out of psych wards, residential, partial, just about anything you can think of to figure out like just what was wrong with me. I cycled through different diagnoses of bipolar. For a little while, they were considering borderline. I am actually autistic, and that solved a little bit of the puzzle, but still wasn't complete until this diagnosis. So if you've been in a bunch of different kinds of therapy and it's not been working out for you, that might be a sign to look a little bit deeper at this, especially if you have a history of trauma. Along with that, abnormal reactions to medications. Basically, have you taken medications and has it had no effect when usually it's a very effective drug? Or maybe, taking a medication that was supposed to be sedating and instead it was stimulating for you. Any sort of just history of having atypical responses to medications is actually an indicator towards structural dissociation, because medication can affect structurally dissociated individuals kind of unpredictably. Um, it doesn't always play out the same um, as it would with somebody who doesn't have that present. So that's another thing to look for. History of addiction or eating disorders, anything kind of in that category, which I know not everybody thinks of those as in the same category, but it kind of is. Like process addictions, um, like, gambling, sex addiction, it could be substances of any type, alcoholism, or eating disorders. I almost died from anorexia at least once in my lifetime. Have been hospitalized for it multiple times. Um, Basically, behaviors that people do to run away from feelings, to numb themselves. A long pattern of that is another check off on that list. Paradoxical thinking, or uh, what you say not always lining up with what you do necessarily. And this is one that's obviously a lot easier to observe from the outside, but even if you just maybe look back at your own history from as much of an objective perspective as you can, this can look like saying you really, want this new job you have to work out, and yet you're not showing up. You're not seeming to take it very seriously. It could look like making plans to do something next summer when you're also vocalizing or know internally you have plans to not be around at that time. Basically just holding seemingly contrasting like beliefs, goals, desires, drives, kind of working against yourself. It can play out as a lot of self-sabotage, thinking you want something, and yet for whatever reason you are still engaging in behaviors that stop you from getting to that. Somatic symptoms is a big one, and this one was hard for me to recognize within myself, which is kind of surprising now looking back at the assessment that I was given for dissociative disorders. I checked off almost every box in that category, but it's hard to recognize when it's you. But this can look like chronic migraines or headaches that there doesn't seem to be an explanation for it. Doctors haven't really been able to figure out what's going on, give you a solution to that. Numbness or joint pain, fatigue. It can even look like seizures, tics, small movements that maybe you don't have control over. It can manifest in a lot of ways, and I'd recommend looking into some of those ways because I'm certainly not really an expert. I think those are mostly the big ones to look out for. If any of those or all of those sound like they might apply to you, again, I'd encourage you just to look into the theory of structural dissociation a little bit more. There's a lot of value to be found there, and honestly, I never would have even begun making progress if I hadn't found out that this was going on and started getting treatment for that. So, hope this is helpful, and maybe I'll have more to say later. We'll see.